It's a big fat Dell.
Ooh!
It's a Dell Latitude Model D 531. This puppy was slated to be tossed at work, so I took it before it reached the bin. It's pretty clean and not at all beat up. Unusual for a laptop. It even came with a power brick. A rare thing for most laptops. On one side, we have a DVD drive and USB ports. On the other side, we have audio ins and outs and a 1394 port. On the back, we have Ethernet, S-video output, telephone jack, a serial port, and a VGA output. I don't know why, but it tickles my fancy to see an S-video port. Yes, this sucker is old. The stickers say it's got a Windows XP installed and has an AMD Turon 64 processor. Now I'm intrigued. The Turon 64 was a dual-core mobile processor that came out around the same time as the Intel Core 2 Dual. This means it can handle a modern 64-bit operating system. Powering it on, it tells me the BIOS battery is dead. Not surprising at all. We'll go past that for now. And it boots into Windows XP, which unfortunately is password blocked. But that's okay. It's D-band time. Opening up the BIOS, we can see that the processor is running at a pokey 1.6 GHz. And it only has 1 gig of memory installed. We'll have to fix that. The main battery is dead. No amount of charging seems to fill it up. But since I'll be using the power brick, it shouldn't matter. So I bought some yummy fast RAM for the system, 4 gigs in total. Still a bit anemic, but it should help things a lot. 4 gigs of laptop RAM is fairly cheap, and there was no price difference between the slower RAM and the faster RAM, so I purchased the fastest RAM the machine could handle. We have our trusty manual loaded up on a spare laptop for easy reference. Always check out the fine manual before digging into your laptops. They can be tricky to disassemble and fix. First, let's pull the main battery. It may be dead, but why take chances? Opening one of the back covers, we find the BIOS battery and an empty RAM slot. A very thin piece of plastic was all that was holding the battery in place, and with age, it became brittle and the plastic broke while removing the battery. I had to find a small piece of plastic, shave it to size, and glue it into place. I put a small piece of fabric insulation to hold the plastic in place while it cured. Changing the battery will be more challenging next time, but I'll worry about that in 10 years or so. And while I was there, I put in a 2 GB SODIMM stick. According to the manual, the other RAM slot is behind the keyboard. To get at the keyboard, I first had to remove the top cover. The plastic felt a little brittle, and I had to move carefully and slowly. As a later note, putting it back on correctly was actually more difficult. Pulling the keyboard wasn't too hard, but it was definitely a delicate operation. Now we can install more yummy RAM, and re-grease the CPU and heatsink while we're in there. The BIOS sees all the RAM. We're looking good. At this point, let's install a lightweight Linux distribution. My go-to distro, Xubuntu, crashed during install. This is not good. Let's try Antix Linux. It's a seriously retro distribution using lots of lightweight programs and desktops. It defaulted to ICE Windows Manager, which was a real blast from the past for me. The first usable Linux distro I used was LibreNet, which was based on Debian Potato, and it used the ICE Windows Manager. But with only an 80 GB hard drive and spinning Rust at that, it was time to consider something a little snazzier. I'm taking this picture so I know the proper position for the new drive. How about this cheap ADATA 120 gig drive? I prefer more expensive SSDs like Western Digital or Samsung, but we're on a budget here. The BIOS doesn't see the SSD? Let's check the built-in Dell diagnostics. No drive? Maybe it doesn't like the solid-state drive? Okay, let's try a different standard SATA drive. This 500 gigabyte SATA drive is a bit over the top, but it's spinning rust and not solid state, and I know it works. Nope, undetected. This isn't happy. Okay, let's try an older Western Digital pulled from another machine. It's the same size as the original drive, and I know it works. Okay, it's being seen in the BIOS, and I was able to install Antix on it. Still, curious. Let's try flashing the BIOS. Using a USB stick with FreeDOS on it, I've downloaded the A10 and A12 BIOS. We'll install the A10 flash first, then the A12. Can't flash BIOS because the battery is too low? Picky, picky, picky. Oh, fine. Here's a fine new battery. And it has a nice new battery charge. BIOS A10 flash is done. Whoopee! Let's try the A12 BIOS. No flash for the A12 BIOS. Hopefully the A10 will be good enough. Well, shoot. Even the A10 BIOS doesn't see the SSD. Oh, wait a minute. There's a physical size difference. The SSD and the 500 gig drives are slightly thinner than the SATA drives that worked. The thinner drives seemed just a little loose when I installed them. Maybe they're not making proper contact? Digging into the subject of 2.5-inch drive specifications, I discovered that they come in 3 different thicknesses. Who knew? Well, now I do, and so do you. We'll tape a cardboard shim to the SSD to test it. I made sure that it fit nice and snugly into the hard drive slot. And the BIOS sees the SSD. Now we're cooking. And Antix installed just fine. So, how does it work? Not too bad. The Wi-Fi stinks, but I may just be too far away from the source since my Wi-Fi router is on the 2nd floor and I'm in the basement. Or there could be a driver issue. The touchpad works, but it's really sensitive. That may also be a driver issue. As for Antix, it's fairly fast even on a 1.6 GHz processor. Some of the programs are a bit too primitive for my taste, but they work. I might try installing Debian XFCE. Grandma Debian runs old hardware like a champ, and XFCE is fairly lightweight desktop. So destined for e-waste, this old Dell has another shot at life. It will be my bench computer for viewing manuals and maybe some serial communications work. Thanks for watching. Leave a like, a comment, or subscribe. I'm a tiny channel, and every response makes my day. So read those fine manuals, observe differences in hardware, and as always, stay curious.